Welcome back to our special coverage of the wedding of Britain's Prince Harry to the American actress Meghan Markle, who are getting married on the edge of London at Windsor Castle. It was announced earlier on today that Prince Harry, who is the Queen's grandson, he's also sixth in line to the throne, will here on after be titled the Duke of Sussex. Well, inside the chapel, as you can see, everyone sitting patiently. The music has begun. It's about 600 guests assembled there, and outside the castle are thousands of well-wishers watching this event around the world. Of course, are millions of people. It's being broadcast all over the world. Some 2 billion people watched the last royal wedding, which was, of course, the wedding of Prince William to Catherine Middleton. And there you can see the musicians in full swing and the audience keenly awaiting the arrival of the Queen. She's expected to be there in about 15 minutes from now. And also, most importantly, perhaps on a day like today, the bride and groom themselves. There you can see Britain's Prince Edward, his wife, the Countess of Wessex, their children, former British Prime Minister John Major and his wife Norma. They're sitting there in the audience watching as the ceremony gets started. You can see there Prince Andrew, his daughter Beatrice, next to her Eugenie, Princess Eugenie, who's joined by her future husband. She too is going to be getting married. And there, of course, is the bridal vehicle carrying the all-important, the star of the day, the American actress Meghan Markle, who is about to become known as the Duchess of Sussex. That's the scene. She's on her way to the chapel. Let's hope she gets there on time. Well, here with me in the studio to follow that wedding are Ophélie Siméon, who is an associate professor of British history at the Sorbonne Nouvelle University here in Paris. Welcome to you. Thank you so much for coming to speak to us. I'm also joined by Paris-based British businessman Richard Makin-Poole. Hello, Richard. Thank you very much for coming to see us.
Thank you.
In the field, we've got our very own Bénédicte Paviot, who is at Kensington Palace, standing by for us. The sun seems to be shining on you, Bénédicte, and at Windsor Castle is France 24's Mark Owen. Let's go straight to Windsor and speak to Mark, because the show is about to get started. We're less than 20 minutes away now. Is everything ready?
Everything's ready as far as I can see. Taking a look at Prince Harry and Prince William strolling along, looking very splendid in their uniforms. Crowds cheering, of course, left, right and centre. Windsor, of course, packed with people. Behind me, you can see either side of my head the towers of Windsor Castle, where everything's taking place. And yes, everything's looking as though it's going exactly to plan.
And it looks like they couldn't have asked for better weather, Mark.
It's fantastic. People are lapping it up completely. I mean, some people are saying that maybe those who might have come to the field behind to watch on the big screens might stay at home, have a barbecue, watch on TV, those kind of things. But the centre of town is completely packed. All the pavements, all along the procession, all along the route, it is completely lined. Multiple layers of people deep. It is absolutely amazing. The security team's doing a fantastic job. The police are doing a great job. The support services to help people who may be overcome by the heat, that kind of thing. Everybody's in place. Everybody's looking after everyone else, really. There's a real nice spirit about what's going on. People very much being patient, waiting to see what happens, and, of course, waiting for a glimpse of the happy couple.
Yeah, we were just getting glimpses of a very happy-looking David Beckham, one of the faces in the crowd I was just looking at there. Mark, I'm going to speak to you in a moment, because I'd like to ask you a little bit more about the order of service and some of the highlights as far as you're concerned in the order of service, which is a bit different from other royal orders of service. But before we do that, why don't we just quickly go to Kensington Palace and speak to Bénédicte Paviot, who is standing by for us there. Bénédicte, there's something of a party going on there. Tell us what exactly is happening.
I think there is something of a party, and it's really across this United Kingdom. United, I think, for today. And a very sunny United Kingdom it is too. Welcome to Kensington Palace. I have Keith here with your teacup that hasn't got anything in it yet. Why are you here today?
Celebrate the wedding. A beautiful day in the park.
And for you, the royal family, and the fact that Meghan is joining this royal family, what does it mean to you?
It means family, and family means everything to us.
Okay, so you think this is good news
Yeah,
for the royal
brilliant
family?
news, yeah.
Excellent.
Great.
Modernising itself.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And Helen,
Hi.
with the gorgeous Jessie. So you are beautifully attired for the occasion. And you're here by the pond that many will know, Kensington Gardens, with Kensington Palace behind us. And why, you've decided to come here. It's a sunny day. You want to share the experience.
Yes, we've brought a picnic. We've come with all our family and friends today to celebrate, from the smallest one to the oldest one, probably being me. And we've come to celebrate. I think someone missed out on our tickets. We should have been invited, really, but we thought we'd come to Kensington Palace, the closest we could get to their home, and celebrate.
Do you think the royal family in 2018 is important and a unifying factor for the United Kingdom?
I think it brings a lot of revenue to this country. They do a lot of good work, and to have a nice, strong female back into the royal family is a blessing.
What about you, sir? So for you, Meghan, is that good news to have a welcome addition?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's nice for their royal family to modernise slightly and just be up with the time. Yeah.
Which country are you from?
I'm from Sweden.
Have you come over specially, or do you live in London?
I live in London for some years. So.
And how is the royal family seen in Sweden?
It's not as strong as here, I must say, the last few years, but I think most people like it as well.
So are you all kind of wondering what dress we're going to see on Meghan Markle very, very shortly?
Yes, we're wondering whether it's going to be Stella McCartney, maybe, or McQueen, or even Jenny Packham. We're quite excited about it.
And there was some sort of speculation that Prince Harry might, if he was going to wear a military uniform, going to shave his beard. Do you think that's on, off?
No, keep it on, keep it on.
Keep it on.
Keep it on.
I think we have a consensus. The beard needs to stay. Maybe we should ask Meghan, the future Duchess of Sussex, what she thinks about that. So really a lovely family-friendly time here in the United Kingdom, outside, of course, the home that was before Harry's and William's mother's home, Princess Diana. And she will be very present in that chapel because, of course, all her siblings will be there. So Diana present also in that ceremony. Very moving ceremony.
Indeed.
We're watching eagerly.
All right, but we'll check in with you. Of course, we are talking about the late Princess of Wales' younger son, Prince Harry, getting married today. That is the car carrying his bride-to-be down one of the main avenues of Windsor into the grounds of Windsor Castle. And that is where the wedding will take place, in a 15th century chapel, St George's Chapel there in Windsor. Very smart Rolls-Royce there with Meghan Markle and her mother beside her, and we're going to look at that much anticipated dress in just a moment. Just coming back to us here in the studio, I mean, looking at these scenes, Richard and Ophélie, I mean, I'm reminded, living abroad as I do from the UK, just how eccentric the British are. Richard, I mean, what is the appeal of a royal family like this in the year 2018? So eccentric.
You know, I think from looking at these pictures that we've just seen now on the screen, obviously we see that there's a real sense of patriotism. It's obviously a great positivity for the British Tourist Board, which we know. We Brits are pretty eccentric. Harry, obviously, is the Princess of Wales' second son. The most photographed woman in the world, probably with the Queen as well, obviously. And here he is marrying Meghan Markle, this glamorous actress, American, divorced, biracial. I think it shows that, once again, there's a real modernization of the royal family. And they've very much come throughout the last 20, 30, 40 years. There's been really a lot of changes. The kind of people that they've been marrying, a lot more commoners, if I can put it like that, have been coming into the royal family. And I think it just shows, once again, that this family is very, very international, connected to all the royal families of Europe. And the last point I would say is, quite frankly, the royal wedding really does make a nice change from all the dreary news that we keep hearing about. I think it gives people some kind of positivism.
Yeah, a bit of optimism, and
Absolutely.
The sun is out, and it seems like the sun is shining on the UK for once. We often talk about the bad British weather, and just turning to you, Ophélie. I mean, it's extraordinary as a British person living in Paris, as both Richard and I are, to see the level of interest amongst French people? This is on every single French television channel that I've noticed, that I've walked past. What is the appeal?
Yes, absolutely. The French are very much interested in the royal wedding. I guess that we basically, French people who are interested in that royal wedding have a thing for what they don't have, because France is a republic, and I think there is quite a degree of fascination for monarchy, whether we admit it or not.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it, that a country that decided off with the heads of the kings and queens should be interested in the royal goings-on across the channel, something that a lot of people just don't quite... Perhaps there isn't a good reason for it.
Well, my sense is that perhaps it's the idea that in Britain, okay, it's a monarchy, but it's also a modern democracy, and I guess it's this equilibrium, this mix, which really catches people's attention.
We've just been looking at pictures there. There you can see the groom-to-be on the left and his brother sitting beside him. His brother, of course, has been through all of this. He got married 5 or so years ago, both of them in formal military uniforms, waiting patiently at the altar for the bride. And we know she's on her way, and they probably do too. We've seen her driving down the main drive towards Windsor Castle, where she will be escorted down the aisle for at least part of the walk down the aisle by the future King of England, no less, Prince Charles, who is, of course, the father of those two men we're looking at there on our screens. And it was announced this morning that Prince Harry is going to be known here on after as the Duke of Sussex. Anything significant about that, Richard?
Yeah, in actual fact, the title was first given to the sixth son of George III, Prince Augustus Frederick. He was given the title in 1801, and obviously the title became extinct in 1843 on his death. It is obviously a peerage of the United Kingdom. It's one of the several royal dukedoms that we have, of which obviously there was the Duke of...
We've got the Duke of Edinburgh, for example, who's the most senior duke.
Exactly, and on his death, that will then be passed on to the present Earl of Wessex, Prince Edward, who it was announced that on the death of his father, that would go straight to his son.
Oh, right. So that'll be passed on, and these are otherwise...
It will be passed on.
Extinct, but very prestigious titles.
Absolutely.
Not many dukes in the UK.
We have obviously we have the non-royal dukes, and then we obviously have all the royal. Normally what happens is on the weddings of each senior member, they are given a royal dukedom.
And it gets announced, doesn't it, sort of roughly on the morning?
It does,
and this morning's was in line with other similar
This is what happened
announcements.
with, for example, the Duke of Cambridge. It was announced when he married Catherine Middleton that they would also be known as the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge.
OK, well, we're just looking at scenes there from Windsor, where we can see the sister of the bride arriving. And there's, of course, a whole entourage, the final guests. Probably the most important guest coming last. The most important guest, most certainly arriving last year, is, of course, the bride. We also expect the Queen to be there in the next 2 to 3 minutes, arriving at St George's Chapel there in Windsor, where it looks like the weather has been extremely kind to the crowds. And there you can see the car carrying the bride very close to arriving there. Ophelia, let me turn to you. I mean, what do you think someone like Meghan Markle is going to bring to this ancient institution?
Well, there's a general understanding that she symbolises modernisation for the royal family. I mean, if we compare what the situation was when the future Duke of Windsor wished to marry the American twice-divorcee Wallis Simpson, well, we see how times have changed. And so Meghan Markle, the fact that she's biracial, the fact that she's an American, that she's a divorcee, that's really significant. And Black Britons hope that this would, well, make it easier for them to be part of British society, even though discrimination is still part of British society, especially in the Brexit era.
Absolutely. Well, there we can see, we just saw the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall arriving. That is, of course, Prince Charles and Camilla, as they're often called in the newspapers. There is the Queen arriving, the Queen of England, with her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, the other Duke we were just talking about there, Richard. He's, of course, 96 years old, the Duke of Edinburgh. He hasn't been very well, has he, recently?
No, he hasn't. As we know, he's had a hip replacement and wasn't sure whether he was going to be able to come to the ceremony or not, but fortunately, he's such an incredible personality.
It's amazing, isn't it? He's
96 years of age. He's very sprightly. As we know, last year he not only cut back on royal engagements, but he put an end to his official royal engagements. So we have not been seeing him around as much as we were in the past. So it's nice to see him on these occasions.
And sitting beside him, his wife, who's 92 years old, Queen of England. And she's in fantastic health as well, isn't she?
Absolutely, absolutely. They really
showing
are.
No signs of slowing down. And here she is watching her grandson of her eldest son, the son of her eldest son, the second son of her eldest son, getting married. And there we can see her. What's she wearing? She dressed. Is that yellow, or is my screen? I think she's dressed in yellow. There we are. The Queen has arrived bang on time. We were told she would be there at 5 to 1 Central European time, and she is certainly on time. So we're just waiting now for the bride to arrive. She should be there, of course, the groom and his brother waiting patiently at the altar. And Prince Harry sporting that beard, some people suggesting he might have shaved it off for the occasion, but he hasn't. That's good news for people like you and me, isn't it, Richard?
Absolutely.
The beards are clearly still in favour.
Absolutely, and in fact, Ulfily was mentioning just before about the fact about him being able to wear the beard.
Yes, because he's wearing his navy uniform. The army wouldn't have tolerated a beard.
Oh, really? So he's picked his uniform.
That's what I read yesterday.
To match the beard. Okay, well,
yes.
that's good.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to get into trouble and rung up by the defence minister on his own wedding day. That would put a bit of a dampener on things. But here is clearly the cars that everyone has been waiting for. We've had a bit of a peek, haven't we, at the dress, Richard? We sort of have a vague idea of what it looks like.
We seem to think that it is by the Canadian designers, and the name
escapes me
as
well.
But we will find out once.
I think it's white.
Yes.
There was speculation that it might not be. It could be ivory.
Because Diana's dress was ivory back in 1981 when she married when the Lady Diana Spencer at the time married the Prince of Wales.
All right, and here we can see the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh arriving, everyone bowing, not least her grandsons who are standing there at the altar. And we can expect the bride to arrive very shortly. We know Prince Charles is there, and he's playing an important role. He's filling in for someone about whom there's been a huge amount of speculation. It must be a source of some sadness to Meghan, the future Duchess of Sussex, that her own father couldn't be here. And there was a lot of speculation in the press, not all of it very kind, about the absence of the dad.
Absolutely, it was. I think the press did. I think there were various traps which were set for him, as we know earlier on during the week. But at the same time, the palace has come out saying that there was obviously a problem of health. So I think everybody is sticking with that story and giving the benefit of the doubt.
And the idea of the bride to be being walked down the aisle by a future monarch, is that something without precedent?
I think it's a real endorsement, it's a real acceptation of this young lady, of Miss Markle, into the royal family. There have been in the past precedents. For example, there was Queen Victoria, who, obviously because her husband had passed away, she led two of her daughters, Helena and Beatrice, down the aisles. There have been also the Duke of Edinburgh, who also led the Princess Margaret, the sister of the present Queen, also down the aisle because obviously King George VI, her father, had passed away in 1952.
Right, so it's not entirely without precedent.
Absolutely.
There we can see, that must be the bridal vehicle there. We just saw the Duchess of Cambridge, formerly known as Kate, arriving there with some of the flower girls, bridesmaids. And there, it would appear, is a page boy peeking out from behind, in front of the future Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle. She won't be known as Meghan Markle for much longer. She's just about to arrive, it would appear, and be walked down the aisle by the future King of England, and as Richard was saying, a massive endorsement. She must feel pretty welcome, don't you think, into the family, if her future father-in-law's walking her down the aisle?
Yes, it seems that she's been very well welcomed in the family. If I remember well, she attended Christmas. She spent Christmas with the royal family, which is quite new, because usually if you are not married, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not allowed to attend Christmas with the royal family. So I think we can see that as a sign that, yes, she's been accepted into the royal family.
Let's just go to Windsor and just listen in to the crowds cheering as the bride arrives. We're expecting her to step out of that stunning Rolls-Royce any minute now. Meghan Markle, as she steps out of that vehicle, her whole life is about to change. Well, if you're just tuning in, you're looking at Meghan Markle, as she's been known up until this point in her life, an American actress who is about to marry Britain's Prince Harry, who's standing there at the altar, as you can see, the 6th in line to the British throne. There she is, being escorted down the aisle of St George's Chapel at Windsor Castle by her future father-in-law in the place of her own father, who couldn't make it due to reasons of ill health. A very proud-looking Prince Harry meeting his bride at the altar, just behind him his own brother, Prince William. We can see behind him too the Queen of England and her husband, the Duke of Edinburgh. And Richard, you spotted a couple of familiar faces amongst the ranks of the page boys and the bridesmaids.
Yes, absolutely. We can see that obviously there's Prince George, who is the 4-year-old son of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, along with also Princess Charlotte, who's 3 years old. As we know, Louis, who was born about a month ago now, is not actually at the ceremony. And it really is a mixture of children, of friends, and of family. We see also that there's Florence Van Cutsem. There's also Jasper Dyer. His father was the equerry to Prince Charles and was extremely important after the death of Diana in the life of Prince Harry. He took him to Lesotho, where obviously he then set up this organisation with Prince Seeiso of Lesotho, which is called Sentibale.
Okay, and this is
helping young children with AIDS and HIV.
And clearly issues like that are very close to the heart of Prince Harry. He's been very active, hasn't he, from an early age in sort of charitable work.
Yes, and his most recent venture into charity is activism in the field of mental health awareness.
Okay, and clearly he's carrying the mantle in many ways, isn't he, for his mother, who she blazed quite a trail for both her sons.
Christ,
yes.
The love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you. God is love, and those who live in love live in God, and God lives in them. In the presence of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we have come together to witness the marriage of Henry, Charles, Albert, David, and Rachel Meghan, to pray for God's blessing on them, to share their joy, and to celebrate their love. Marriage is a gift of God in creation, through which husband and wife may know the grace of God. It is given that as man and woman grow together in love and trust, they shall be united with one another in heart, body, and mind, as Christ is united with his bride, the Church. The gift of marriage brings husband and wife together in the delight and tenderness of sexual union and joyful commitment to the end of their lives. It's given as the foundation of family life.
Okay, we're looking there at Britain's sixth in line to the throne, Prince Harry, standing at the altar with his bride, Meghan Markle, as she is still known, soon to be the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Let's cross to France 24's Mark Owen, who's standing by for us in Windsor. Mark, it looks like this event, like so many royal events, is choreographed down to the last minute. Everyone was on time, weren't they?
Tom, it's one of these things that when you've been married or been to a wedding, you know everything has to go to time. Everything has to be to plan. Everything has to be done with precision. And there's the Queen, I can see there, and the Duke of Edinburgh, and they've been through this so many times and seen this done in so many different ways. But somehow the same way, of course, every time with the royal family. This time, a ceremony with a lot of differences, as we were talking about earlier, little additions, a kind of customising that Meghan Markle's clearly had a strong say in. And maybe this is a sign of a different direction for the royal family in many ways, bringing someone like Meghan into the fold as someone who is different and embracing those differences, which seems to be a wonderful thing. We've heard stories from behind the scenes that she's really been made one of the family and very much welcomed into the royal family, which is, I think, a really positive thing to see, because now the royal family perhaps begins to reflect in many ways the society that it represents, with the massive growth of mixed race relationships in the UK since the late 40s, 50s, 60s, up to today, when it's very, very normal to find mixed marriages. And once upon a time, of course, this was frowned upon. So this could be a boot in the backside to the racists in our society, which still exist, sadly. But clearly someone here who is poised, incredibly good looking, intelligent, committed to causes, and someone who has a big heart, it seems, as well as her own fame from her acting career and her own Hollywood aspect as well, alongside the man who is today the UK's most popular member of the royal family, Prince Harry, in the recent survey, beating the Queen into second place, which is quite remarkable. And I think the thing about Prince Harry is that he's been through so much in his life. Obviously, very few of us will ever forget the shots of him as a 12-year-old pursuing the coffin of his mother, having to walk behind as ceremony dictated. And that was one of the most difficult moments, I think, of his life, and he's spoken about that. He's been through many different little things that he's got wrong, growing up, growing pains, if you like. He's gone through... A friend of mine once worked as a press officer to Prince Charles, and I asked him once, could we have Prince Harry to talk about something and maybe discuss why he made the wrong decision about, say, something he wore for a fancy dress party? And that press officer said to me, honestly, we can't trust him. He's such a loose cannon. But I think what we're seeing now is Prince Harry as a very different person, someone who's done time as a soldier, someone who is working to help causes and is now married what looks like, engaged in what looks like an almost perfect royal union.
Yeah, and just looking at that scene there in Windsor, it's almost as if that chapel, this whole ceremony, the costumes, the uniforms, everything absolutely made for the modern television screen. Fantastic scenes there, absolutely the most telegenic scenes you could ask for in the TV news world. The chapel, St George's Chapel there at Windsor Castle. Thanks, Mark. We'll come back to you in just a moment. They've just finished singing the first hymn there at Windsor Castle. We're now going to have the declarations of the bride and groom. Let's listen in.
To declare it now. Harry and Meghan, the vows you are about to take are to be made in the presence of God, who is judge of all and knows all the secrets of our hearts. Therefore, if either of you knows a reason why you may not lawfully marry, you must declare it now. Harry, will you take Meghan to be your wife? Will you love her, comfort her, honour and protect her, and forsaking all other, be faithful to her as long as you both shall live?
I will.
Meghan, will you take Harry to be your husband? Will you love him, comfort him, honour and protect him, and forsaking all others, be faithful to him as long as you both shall live?
I will.
And will you, the families and friends of Harry and Meghan, support and uphold them in their marriage now and in the years to come? As we stand, let us pray for Harry and Meghan. God, our Father, from the beginning you have blessed creation with abundant life. Pour out your blessings upon Harry and Meghan, that they may be joined in mutual love and companionship, in holiness and commitment to each other. We ask this through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who is alive and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen.
Okay, we've just been listening there to the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, reading the declarations. Let's listen in now to the aunt of Prince Harry.
And come away. For now the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree puts forth its figs, and the vines are in blossom. They give forth fragrance. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is strong as death, passion fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, a raging flame. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If one offered for love all the wealth of one's house, it would be utterly scorned.
Well, there we've been listening to Lady Jane Fellows, who is, of course, the sister of the late Diana, Princess of Wales, reading from the Song of Solomon there at the wedding of her nephew, Prince Harry. So representing the Spencer family, which, of course, is 50% of the family of Prince Harry, who's getting married today to Meghan Markle. And it's nice, isn't it, Richard, that they should have involved the Spencer family in today's proceedings?
Absolutely. There were actually there were two elder sisters, Lady Jane Fellows, whom we've just heard now, who's married to Robert Fellows, who was private secretary to Her Majesty the Queen. And then, secondly, Lady Sarah McCorkadale, who she married we say a farmer, but in fact a landowner.
Smart farmer.
A smart farmer, indeed. And, funnily enough, was a second cousin, I think once removed, of Reign Spencer, who obviously married Diana's father as in the second marriage. She was married to the Earl of Dartmouth, and then she married, secondly, Lord Spencer, and thirdly, she married a French count, Jean-François de Chambrun. And then she divorced, and then took back the title of Countess Spencer, Reign Countess Spencer. And obviously, then there's also Viscount Spencer, who then became Earl Spencer on the death of his father, who's Charles Spencer, who is actually a well-known writer, journalist. There was also, I think, another son as well who died in infancy.
That's right, yeah. Diana had a younger brother who died when he was a small child. Well, I'm glad we've got Richard talking us through the genealogy, because I think I'd have got lost with all of those marriages. But as we heard there, Professor Simeon, there was a French connection even in Diana's family, this count that her stepmother ended up marrying. So do you think that's a link that many French people are particularly interested in?
It's actually the first time I ever heard of that French connection, so I can only speak for myself. I have no idea if that's significant, to be honest.
And just looking at the idea that, they've introduced Princess Diana, Princess of Wales' sister. Actually, let's listen into the bishop speaking there in London.
Son and Holy Spirit. Amen. From the Song of Solomon in the Bible. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is as strong as death, passion fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, a raging flame. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it out. The late Dr. Martin Luther King once said, and I quote, "We must discover the power of love, the redemptive power of love. And when we do that, we will make of this old world a new world. For love is the only way." There's power in love. Don't underestimate it. Don't even over-sentimentalize it. There's power power in love. If you don't believe me, think about a time when you first fell in love. The whole world seemed to center around you and your beloved. Well, there's power in love. Not just in its romantic forms, but any form, any shape of love. There's a certain sense in which when you are loved and you know it, when someone cares for you and you know it, when you love and you show it, it actually feels right. There's something right about it. And there's a reason for it. The reason has to do with the source. We were made by a power of love. And our lives were meant and are meant to be lived in that love. That's why we are here. Ultimately, the source of love is God Himself, the source of all of our lives. There's an old medieval poem that says, "Where true love is found, God Himself is there." The New Testament says it this way: "Beloved, let us love one another, because love is of God, and those who love are born of God and know God. Those who do not love do not know God." Why? For God is love. There's power in love. There's power in love to help and heal when nothing else can. There's power in love to lift up and liberate when nothing else will. There's power in love to show us the way to live. Set me as a seal on your heart, a seal on your arm. For love, it's as strong as death. But love is not only about a young couple. Now, the power of love is demonstrated by the fact that we're all here. Two young people fell in love, and we all showed up. But it's not just for and about a young couple who we rejoice with. It's more than that. Jesus of Nazareth, on one occasion, was asked by a lawyer to sum up the essence of the teachings of Moses. And he went back and reached back into the Hebrew scriptures to Deuteronomy and Leviticus. And Jesus said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." And then in Matthew's version, he added, he said, "On these two, love of God and love of neighbor, hang all the law, all the prophets, everything that Moses wrote, everything in the holy prophets, everything in the scriptures, everything that God has been trying to tell the world. Love God, love your neighbors, and while you're at it, love yourself." No. Someone once said that Jesus began the most revolutionary movement in all of human history, a movement grounded in the unconditional love of God for the world, and a movement mandating people to live that love, and in so doing, to change not only their lives, but the very life of the world itself. I'm talking about some power, real power, power to change the world. If you don't believe me, well, there were some old slaves in America's antebellum South who explained the dynamic power of love and why it has the power to transform. They explained it this way. They sang a spiritual, even in the midst of their captivity. It's one that says there is a balm in Gilead, a healing balm, something that can make things right. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. And one of the stanzas actually explains why. They said, if you cannot preach like Peter, and you cannot pray like Paul, you just tell the love of Jesus, how he died to save us all. Oh, that's the balm in Gilead. This way of love, it is the way of life. They got it. He died to save us all. He didn't die for anything he could get out of it. Jesus did not get an honorary doctorate for dying. He wasn't getting anything out of it. He gave up his life. He sacrificed his life for the good of others, for the good of the other, for the well-being of the world, for us. That's what love is. Love is not selfish and self-centered. Love can be sacrificial, and in so doing becomes redemptive. And that way of unselfish, sacrificial, redemptive love changes lives, and it can change this world. If you don't believe me, just stop and think for a imagine. Think and imagine. Well, think and imagine a world where love is the way. Imagine our homes and families when love is the way. Imagine neighborhoods and communities where love is the way. Imagine governments and nations where love is the way. Imagine business and commerce when love is the way. Imagine this tired old world when love is the way. When love is the way, unselfish, sacrificial, redemptive, when love is the way, then no child will go to bed hungry in this world ever again. When love is the way, we will let justice roll down like a mighty stream and righteousness like an ever-flowing brook. When love is the way, poverty will become history. When love is the way, the earth will be a sanctuary. When love is the way, we will lay down our swords and shields down by the riverside to study war no more. When love is the way, there's plenty good room. Plenty good room for all of God's children. Because when love is the way, we actually treat each other, well, like we are actually family. When love is the way, we know that God is the source of us all, and we are brothers and sisters, children of God. My brothers and sisters, that's a new heaven, a new earth, a new world, a new human family. And let me tell you something. Old Solomon was right in the Old Testament. That's fire. Teilhard de Chardin, and with this I will sit down. We got to get you all married. French Jesuit Teilhard de Chardin was arguably one of the great minds, great spirits of the 20th century. A Jesuit, Roman Catholic priest, scientist, a scholar, a mystic. In some of his writings, he said, from his scientific background as well as his theological one, some of his writings he said, as others have, that the discovery or invention or harnessing of fire was one of the great scientific and technological discoveries in all of human history. Fire, to a great extent, made human civilization possible. Fire made it possible to cook food and to provide sanitary ways of eating, which reduced the spread of disease in its time. Fire made it possible to heat warm environments and thereby made human migration around the world a possibility, even into colder climates. Fire made it possible. There was no Bronze Age without fire. No Iron Age without fire. No Industrial Revolution without fire. The advances of science and technology are greatly dependent on the human ability and capacity to take fire and use it for human good. Anybody get here in a car today? An automobile? Nod your heads if you did, I'm guessing. I know there were some carriages. But those of us who came on cars, fire, the controlled, harnessed fire, made that possible. I know that the Bible says, and I believe it, that Jesus walked on the water, but I have to tell you, I didn't walk across the Atlantic Ocean to get here. Controlled fire in that plane got me here. Fire makes it possible for us to text and tweet and email and Instagram and Facebook and socially be dysfunctional with each other. Fire makes all of that possible. And Desjardins said fire was one of the greatest discoveries in all of human history. And he then went on to say that if humanity ever harnesses the energy of fire again, if humanity ever captures the energy of love, it will be the second time in history that we have discovered fire. Dr. King was right. We must discover love, the redemptive power of love. And when we do that, we will make of this old world a new world. My brother, my sister, God love you. God bless you. And may God hold us all in those almighty hands of love.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we see, no, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Ooh, stand by me. Hey, yes, stand by me. Stand by me. Stand by me.
Should crumble to the sea.
I won't cry, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Ooh, stand by me. Yeah, stand by me. Stand by me. Stand by me. Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me? Stand by me. Stand by me. Stand by me. Stand by me. So darling, darling, stand
stand by me, stand by me, stand by me, stand by me.
Okay, this is the scene in the 15th century St George's Chapel at Windsor where Prince Harry is marrying Meghan Markle. They're about to exchange their vows. Let's listen in.
In the presence of God and his people. I, Harry, take you, Meghan.
I, Harry, take you, Meghan.
To be my wife.
To be my wife.
To have and to hold.
To have and to hold.
From this day forward.
From this day forward.
For better, for worse.
For better, for worse.
For richer, for poorer.
For richer, for poorer.
In sickness and in health.
In sickness and in health.
To love and to cherish.
To love and to cherish.
Till death us do part.
Till death us do part.
According to God's holy law.
According to God's holy law.
In the presence of God.
In the presence of God.
I make this vow.
I make this vow.
I, Meghan, take you, Harry.
I, Meghan, take you, Harry.
To be my husband.
To be my husband.
To have and to hold.
To have and to hold.
From this day forward.
From this day forward.
For better, for worse.
For better, for worse.
For richer, for poorer.
For richer, for poorer.
In sickness and in health.
In sickness and in health.
To love and to cherish.
To love and to cherish.
Till death us do part.
Till death us do part.
According to God's holy law.
According to God's holy law.
In the presence of God.
In the presence of God.
I make this vow.
I make this vow.
Heavenly Father, by your blessing, let these rings be to Harry and Meghan a symbol of unending love and faithfulness, to remind them of the vow and covenant which they have made this day, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Meghan, I give you this ring.
Meghan, I give you this ring.
As a sign of our marriage.
As a sign of our marriage.
With my body, I honor you.
With my body, I honor you.
All that I am, I give to you.
All that I am, I give to you.
And all that I have.
And all that I have.
I share with you.
I share with you.
Within the love of God.
Within the love of God.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Harry, I give you this ring.
Harry, I give you this ring.
As a sign of our marriage.
As a sign of our marriage.
With my body, I honor you.
With my body, I honor you.
All that I am, I give to you.
All that I am, I give to you.
And all that I have.
And all that I have.
I share with you.
I share with you.
Within the love of God.
Within the love of God.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
In the presence of God and before this congregation, Harry and Meghan have given their consent and made their marriage vows to each other. They have declared their marriage by the joining of hands and by the giving and receiving of rings. I therefore proclaim that they are husband and wife. Those whom God has joined together, let no one put asunder.
Well, thank you for joining us here on France 24. We're watching scenes from Windsor, where we've seen Prince Harry and his bride Meghan Markle exchanging rings there. And before that, an emotionally charged address by the Most Reverend Michael Curry, who is an Episcopal bishop from New York. He's the first black presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, which is closely associated with the Anglican Church there. Highly emotionally charged, wasn't it, that address he gave?
Yes, and it's a nice break from tradition to have an African American bishop here today, and the style of preaching is also a break from tradition, and yes, so it's a reminder also that the Queen is both the head of state and the head of the Church of England. And in order to marry Prince Harry, Meghan Markle had to convert to Anglicanism.
Okay, and it's interesting as well that Prince Harry has decided to wear a wedding ring, because typically royal grooms don't wear wedding rings, do they?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Very often you don't see them. We know they're married, obviously, when they are, but no, this seems to be, I don't know if it's a precedent, but I've not seen various of the younger or the older members of the royal family with a wedding ring, unless they wear one on their signet ring. But we don't necessarily see it visible on the wedding ring.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of firsts happening there, and that service, that address. My goodness, they definitely haven't heard something like that in the 15th century St George's Chapel. I shouldn't think. Let's go to Benedict Pavio, our correspondent, who's standing by for us at Kensington Palace. Benedict, I don't know if you were able to listen in or watch that address and those events there in St George's Chapel. I'm just wondering if the crowds around you are showing any signs of perhaps sharing the same sorts of emotion that are being felt inside that chapel, Benedict?
Well, there's actually a lot of cheering that's been going on. I think a lot of emotion. Really following very avidly on a giant screen just behind that statue. Hundreds of people came terribly early and with all kinds of picnics and flags, and they have been following every moment, whether it's the Jess by Givenchy, a terribly, beautifully, exquisite dress, a very long train, which is very interesting, a tiara, and of course, yes, that speech. And as you described it, highly emotional, not a great big break with tradition in St George's Chapel. St George's Chapel, where Harry was christened. So I think that there'll be lots of reaction to that, and then I think reflection also on the words that we use there. And they're highly significant that Harry is choosing to wear a wedding ring. This is not, it's done on the continent very much by French men and continental men, but it's not a tradition in this country. So very, very significant. And in those wedding bands, the tradition has been that there be Welsh gold in it. Now, I have with me, it's been melting somewhat as we waited for you, but this is a little replica, if you can see it, of the wedding cake that will be unveiled later on, that has been made with hundreds of Amalfi lemons, with British elderflower, and that is, again, a break with tradition. This is not, for example, what Kate and William had at their wedding. And so I'm going to be enjoying this one, if I may, as soon as I go off air, to sample it. I bought it at Kensington Palace, so I have every reason to believe that it is exquisite and a very
let
good
me stop you there. Let me stop you there, Benedict. Take a little nibble. Take a little nibble for us and tell us what you think. Let's see how you react. Go on, take a bite.
Oh. Oh, it's always a challenge for a broadcaster, isn't it? Okay, all right.
So you can have your cake and eat it.
Okay, I can tell you that the top is a bit crunchy. Yeah, not in Brexit, but you can do that with this wedding cake. Okay, so the Amalfi lemons are just exquisite. They are really superb. I've maybe bitten off more than I can chew, possibly, because I'm talking and broadcasting. Not a good way to behave. And certainly the royal family, with the Queen, you never see the Queen really eating, or indeed just toasting, but not drinking. It's exquisite. It's light, it's subtle, and it's definitely a break with tradition.
Yeah, I think I'd much rather have a cake like that than the typical fruit cake. But as you say, yet another example of why this royal wedding is so different from so many others. And let me come back to you, Richard, here in the studio, just looking at the scene there, and we've been looking at that we watched that address together by Reverend Curry and the song Stand By Me by a gospel choir. I mean, the exchange of rings, you know, as we said, not something we see royal grooms wearing as a wedding ring. That cake seems to be different from the typical boring fruit cake that royals and other smart English weddings sort of would serve. It's so different, isn't it, this wedding?
Yes, there seems to be very much a step forward going towards this modernisation of the monarchy, not just because of obviously the cake and the ring, but there seem to be, over the last 10, 15 years, a lot of big changes in the royal family, and they're moving with the times. They've had to move with the times. Obviously, as we know, there was the terrible, the tragedy of the Princess of Wales. I think that brought the royal family back to realise that there were certain situations that needed to be sorted out, and they really took the bull by the horns, and they really got their act sorted out, if I can put it like that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. The handling of Princess Diana's death was quite catastrophic, as is shown, for instance, in the film The Queen. And the royal family at that time suffered a plunge in popularity ratings. So royal weddings, whether William and Kate's or this one, are always a good opportunity to boost the morale of the British public and restore the emotional connection with the royal family, which is a big factor for those 70% of the British population who support the monarchy.
Yeah, I mean, the monarchy does remain hugely popular, doesn't it?
Yes.
Even
70% of the population, according to the latest polls, and according to the latest census as well, I think.
So there'll be a small percentage, well, 30%, it's not
30%.
small, but a minority.
Yes, the percentage is growing. The percentage is growing, and I mean, republicanism in the UK, it's mostly young people, and usually people who are associated with the left. So basically, the older you are and the more conservative you are, then you are more likely to be a fan of the monarchy.
And just thinking about what's going to be the role of Prince Harry and his wife, the now Duchess of Sussex, what sort of things do young royals do that make them useful and allow them to contribute to public life?
Well, the Constitution forbids them to voice any personal political opinion. So, according to tradition, they're here to perform ceremonial duties, inaugurations, state visits abroad, diplomatic missions, and also being involved in charity is a big part of what they do.
Yeah, and Prince Harry's been quite involved in charity, hasn't he? Even since, didn't his mother take him round some of the sort of crisis centres?
At a very early point in their lives, absolutely. There was the famous photographs that we did see in the press when she took them to Centrepoint, which was an organisation, a charity, which was helping young people, homeless people, and people with addiction. So she very much, at a very, very early age, being, as she was known afterwards, the People's Princess, a term which is very right for her, I think. She was very much, although from a landed family, from an aristocratic family, she very much transcended all classes of people. and was very much in touch. I think this is what we see with the young princes today, both William and Harry, and also with their choices of marriage. They've really, they're very in contact with. I think they're in contact with younger people as well, when we see with all the different charity organisations that they're involved in.
Well, there we can see on our screens the newly married Duke and Duchess of Sussex at Windsor Castle, St George's Chapel, where they've just exchanged vows and rings.
And the blessing of God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be among you and remain with you always. Amen.
Just listening in there to what's happening at St George's Chapel in Windsor. There you can see the Duchess of Cornwall, the second wife of Prince Charles, Prince William sitting on her right, and his wife, the Duchess of Cambridge, formerly known as Kate Middleton there. And just an A to Z of celebrities in the crowd. I've just spotted George Clooney and his wife Amal. The Beckhams are there. The Spice Girls are there, the Elton John is there, quite a lot of the same sorts of people you might in fact have seen at Princess Diana's funeral. And in many ways, we were just saying there, Princess Diana was described as the people's princess. Some might describe this in a way as being the people's wedding, and that it is so much more representative of British society than perhaps typical wedding ceremonies back in the day. I mean, this is, Richard, a far cry, isn't it, from the wedding even of Prince Charles and Diana back in 1981.
Absolutely. When you look back at 1981, obviously there were a lot of courtiers, there were a lot of friends, families, a lot of royal families were involved. Obviously, we also must remember that this particular wedding today is a private occasion. It's not a state occasion.
And he's not going to be the king, is he?
And he's not going to be the king. Hopefully not. Being sixth in line, there are obviously, as we know, Prince William, after the Prince of Wales, and then the three children. So no, hopefully not.
And every child that Prince William and the Duchess of Cambridge produce pushes Harry further down the line, doesn't it?
Which is very much what happened, for example, for Princess Margaret, when she was when her father became the Duke of York, became George VI. She was second in line to the throne after her sister. And then, obviously, when Princess Elizabeth married the Duke of Edinburgh, who was a Prince of Denmark and of Greece and Denmark, obviously with the 4 children that they had, that pushed her down more and more. So she became, obviously, she was not. I'm not saying she was not as important, but not in the line of succession. Yes,
and her sort of sense of responsibility and duty was perhaps, you know, slightly diminished as it became less and less likely she'd have to ever step into that role.
Yes, I think so, absolutely.
Some people compare Prince Harry and Princess Margaret as being the sort of the second in line to the throne, pushed down as the years go by. A sort of rebellious streak that both of them shared, a love of perhaps partying, having a bit of fun. Do you think that's a fair comparison, either of you?
I think it's a good comparison, actually. I don't know what you think, but I think it's a good comparison because obviously both of them second in line to the throne at a certain time. Obviously, as we know, Princess Margaret, she was to marry the Queen's equerry, Group Captain Peter Townsend, and then because obviously he was divorced, they were not allowed to marry. If they were to marry, she was to give up her royal status and leave the country. That's what happened in the 50s. She then married in 1960 Tony Armstrong-Jones, who then became the first Earl Snowdon, and obviously then had 2 children afterwards. David Linley, who has now become, on the death of his father, has now become the second Earl Snowdon. And then we also have Lady Sarah Chatto, who married Daniel Chatto, an artist.
So they're quite an artistic.
They're very artistic, absolutely. Both the current Lord Snowdon and Lady Sarah Chatto, yes, both very much in the artistic world.
Okay, so some comparisons there with the late Princess Margaret, who was, of course, the Queen's sister, and Prince Harry, the man of the day, who we've just seen there getting married in St George's Chapel in Windsor. Let's go to Windsor and speak to Mark Owen. Mark, I mean, we just heard an incredibly emotionally charged address given by the very Reverend Curry there inside the chapel. How did the crowds, how did everyone react, do you think, outside? Do you think that sense of emotion went beyond the walls of St George's Chapel?
Behind me, Thomas, you probably recognise Windsor Castle, where it's all happening, of course, the chapel in the centre of the grounds there. I'm at Home Park, which is just on the outskirts of the town, which people are now funneling to continue the festivities. So this area is going to be completely packed. Behind me, you won't be able to see any grass in about half an hour's time. The reaction that I've got from people as they've been coming through is that they think this is a fantastic ceremony in terms of how it's bringing people in. The inclusiveness of the whole thing is something that's speaking to a lot of people. And I think it's really interesting, the comments that people have made, how they find it really refreshing and warm and new, and a kind of regeneration of the whole idea of being part of the royal family. It's an interesting thing. They almost feel they can get a little bit of access themselves. And it kind of reminds me of how Diana Spencer, Lady Diana Spencer, when she married Prince Charles, became, in a sense, the people's princess. And of course, that's a bit of a misnomer because she was an aristocrat from a very privileged background, but somehow had that touch with normal people. And I remember sort of covering Diana's visits, certainly to the north of England, and you could see how people really warmed to her. And it's going to be the same with Meghan Markle completely. You can see how this woman has the common touch in a sense, although, you know, she's now going to become the Duchess of Sussex and have the title and all the privileges that go with that, but she's still someone who can communicate on a very human level with people, and I think that's spoken to so many people who come here today. And the way the whole ceremony has been carried out, what's been included, everything that's been included, has made people think this is something that really is interesting and different, and something that's better about the royal family.
Yeah, I mean, something of a watershed moment, isn't it, for the royal family, when you look at the faces of the sort of the more established members of the family, the older generation, perhaps hearing that address by the Reverend and the Gospel Choir. Perhaps it was almost as if they were hearing this for the very first time. It was interesting to see their reactions, a sort of mixture of amazement and there was a little bit of amusement as well at certain points of the address. I noticed the lips curling up of one or two of the members of the royal family, perhaps finding the emotion of it all mildly entertaining as well as uplifting. What's going to happen next? We're about to have the national anthem, Mark, and what happens after that?
Your guess is as good as mine, Tom. I can't really get my access to the order of service and what precisely happens next, but of course, traditionally in any wedding, that is the exit of the bride and groom, and they will then go on a tour of the environs, as you say. So basically there is a procession which is arranged through Windsor, leaving the castle grounds, the chapel, the castle grounds, then going through the town. Now, of course, the streets are absolutely jam-packed, chock-a-block with people bedecked in red, white and blue, wearing Harry faces, Meghan faces, crowns, you name it, something to be part of the day. Beards, as you were discussing earlier on, lots of people got false beards today in honour of Harry's beard that he has kept, as you pointed out, and you're keeping yours too, I'm glad to say, and I'll keep mine. And these things will continue. It all goes right around Windsor, and they'll be coming up the road just over there behind me too at some point. So if you join me then, that might be a very fortuitous time, but certainly the big tour of the town, and then basically it's off to wherever the happy couple continue their nuptials.
Absolutely. So beards are in. That's good to know. Marco in there in Windsor with an update on what to expect. That ceremony drawing to a close there at St George's Chapel in Windsor. Cellist performing there. A few pieces of music. We've had a bit of a whole range of tunes. We're about to have Ave Maria, and then it will be the national anthem, and the ceremony will draw to a close. This is, of course, as we've been saying, a very different royal wedding from so many we've seen, but it isn't an affair of state, which is why there are no heads of state there in an official capacity, very few politicians, because it is, of course, a private family wedding, well, as private as it can be for the sixth in line to the throne. Here we can hear now Ave Maria, which is being played on the cello there as the couple sign the register, making them officially, in the eyes of the law, husband and wife, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, who've just become husband and wife. They're signing the register, which officialises all of that. Around 600 guests assembled there in St George's Chapel. They'll then do, as we heard from our correspondent, a tour of Windsor in an open carriage. After that, there's a lunch party being hosted by the Queen, and in the evening, 200 of their closest friends will get together. Perhaps some of the adults will head home, and the younger ones will enjoy a party into the small hours at the House of Frogmore, which is also on the Windsor estate. That's going to be quite a party, isn't it, Richard?
I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful party, and I think also the fact that they're going to be very much amongst themselves. Obviously, as we know, a lot of people who have been invited to this wedding, there have been a lot of people from charities. They've really privileged inviting people for various reasons to this wedding, of obviously their family and friends as well. I think there are certain royals, minor royals, that have not been invited. We've not seen any foreign royals as such, what we've seen on the screens anyway. But I think, yes, there'll be the event with the Queen this afternoon, and then obviously the party will begin this evening, and then obviously they'll be going off on honeymoon, not straight away, I'm told. They have an engagement, as first engagement next week, as husband and wife, and they're intending to go on a honeymoon a little later on. There is speculation to that. Obviously, people are looking at Africa, people are looking at Namibia. He has a great fondness for Namibia and for Botswana. So maybe that's where they'll be heading off.
Yeah, and he does a lot of African charity work, doesn't he?
Absolutely.
Working with AIDS, conservation, all sorts of other important causes. And this is all quite surprising, isn't it? I mean, difficult to have imagined the young Prince Harry, who we were saying earlier on was a bit of a naughty teenager, like a lot of us probably were. But he was under the glare of the public eye as a sort of tearaway teenager. He's really settled down. I mean, people saying perhaps his time in the army did him a bit of good.
Yes, that's what you hear in the British media and in the British press. What I can say about his relation to the media is that he has become quite media savvy. He had no choice, actually. And in another break with tradition, at some point early into the engagement, paparazzi were harassing Meghan Markle, and Prince Harry issued a very rare statement.
He was very protective, wasn't he?
Yes.
Let's listen in. They're about to play the national anthem. Sorry to cut you short.
It's okay.
Well, that is the scene at St George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, where we've just seen the newly titled Duke and Duchess of Sussex leaving the church after their 1 hour long ceremony. They're now going on a coach tour, an open coach tour of Windsor. Where, of course, there is high security today with all of those dignitaries in town. And, of course, that coach tour going right around the town of Windsor, home to that all-important royal residence, Windsor Castle, which has seen weddings and coronations of royalty for close to a millennium. And here with me in the studio are my guests, Professor Ophélie Siméon and Richard Macon-Poole. And just looking at what's happened, just looking at a kind of resume, I cut you off before, so why don't I go straight to you? Everything about this ceremony and everything about how we've seen the day pan out, it's as though Harry's put his stamp on everything, saying, I'm doing it my way.
Yes, I mean, it's pretty obvious that many aspects about this wedding and about the marriage itself are breaks from tradition. But then again, as Richard said earlier, this is a private, or as private as you can be, wedding, not a state wedding. So I guess protocol is not as tight as what it used to be in 2011, for
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Richard, you told me earlier on you were watching the royal wedding of Prince Harry's parents back in the day. That was what, about 35 or so years ago?
1981, absolutely.
1981. I mean, this is a very, very different wedding, isn't it?
Absolutely, completely. And you can see with the way that times have really changed, and the royal family has become, we keep saying this, but it's absolutely true, they've really become very, very modern in today, with keeping, at the same time, keeping tradition. They still have great traditions, but there is a shift towards modernising themselves, and I think that's what's going to help the perenity of the monarchy in the United Kingdom.
And one thing they're really good at, I mean, however people want to regard the royal family, people might want to fault them, one thing they're brilliant at is putting on a show, just like today. I mean, absolutely brilliant, the choreography of these kind of events.
Absolutely, I think that we're very, very strong in the UK for pageantry. And I think it's something which you see a lot of the other royal families in the other European countries where it's staged down a little bit. It's not as formal. Look at the Scandinavian countries. Those royal families are smaller, and they're not as there's not as much pageantry as we have in our own royal family.
The Queen is just leaving there. We can see her there. Departing from St George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, heading presumably to the castle itself, where the lunch, which is being hosted by her, in fact, is being held. We understand there'll be 600 or so guests for that lunch, and then 200 in the evening. Do you think it's going too far to say that the British royal family, with all their connections to other royal houses around Europe, there's Russian blood, there's Greek blood, there's French blood, there's German blood, quite a lot of that. Do you think it's a bridge too far to say that many people across Europe feel perhaps this is a bit like a royal family for all of Europe, and that they do represent so many different aspects of European life? Either of you, what do you think?
I think it would be slightly far-fetched to say that, especially with the German connection, which the royal family, the British royal family, has tried to play down, especially during the Second World War, with the name change. However, I think there is definitely a European connection between the royal family and their counterparts in Europe, but I'm not really sure if that link is really taking center stage.
Okay. There is, of course, an American connection now. Not the first American connection with the British royal family, and a lot of people who are watching, especially the older generation, must be hoping that this time an American divorcee marrying into the royal family is going to be, well, she's going to make more of a success of it than the last one 70, 80 years ago.
I think what, quite simply, obviously it was many years ago, in the 30s, as we know, and Edward VIII did give up the throne in order to be able to marry Wallis Simpson, who was an American divorcee, twice divorced, and she obviously, I think it wasn't just the fact that there was the aspect of being divorced, but there was also the fact that as it then became evident there were also, because of the outbreak of the Second World War, there were also certain sympathy with the Nazis.
Yes.
So I think this is what very much turned the British very much against her. But I think this is obviously a completely different scenario, a completely different situation. She was married for a very short time, and I think they've really they've minimised that. And I think quite simply, Harry is very, very, very happy with his new wife.
I know you have to leave us fairly shortly, but I just want to ask for your final thoughts on what we've seen so far, today's wedding. I mean, how would you sum it all up in your own words, the sort of the course of events that we've been looking at there at St George's Chapel in Windsor? Your thoughts?
I think we've seen a lot of pageantry, but we've also seen, once again, this modernisation, it's becoming, we're seeing with the younger generations of the royals. Obviously, we see William has married Catherine Middleton. We have now Harry marrying Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex. We also have a wedding in the autumn, which is of Princess Eugenie, who is marrying Jack Brooksbank. So I think we see that these people are marrying people simply because they've fallen in love and they really do care for these people. And I think that they're going to make it a great success. I think today has already been a beautiful. The ceremony has been stunningly beautiful and very personal on both ends. I think Meghan was very much involved as well in the choice of songs, in the way in which the event has unravelled.
Okay, well, it's been a fantastic ceremony, as we've been saying. Thank you so much for sharing your encyclopedic knowledge of British history and royalty with us.
Being here on France 24.
Thank you so
very much indeed.
Thank you, Richard Makin-Poole. Let me turn back to you, Ophelia, and ask for your personal thoughts on today and how the events have panned out.
Well, I think there is no denying that Meghan Markle being now the Duchess of Sussex is a historical moment. It's the first time that a biracial person will become part of the royal family. So given sadly the historic connections between Britain and slavery, I think that is history in the making. And yes, I think it's true. I mean, supporters of the monarchy, quite a big number of them do hope that she will bring even more modernisation to that age-old institution that is the royal family.
Absolutely. Some describe it as a real watershed day for the royal family, showing the world that they are, like so many other families, changing in their attitudes. They're moving with the times. And there we can see the newlyweds beginning their open carriage tour through Windsor, the town surrounding Windsor Castle. At the heart of Windsor Castle, St George's Chapel, where they got married. After this, they're going back to the castle, and there's a lunch being hosted by the Queen. So that's the scene inside the walls of the town of Windsor, which is about 30 kilometres or so from central London, delighting the crowds there. And it seems like a lot of people out. They've slept the night out under the facing the elements, basically, a lot of them just with a sleeping bag, and waking up to make sure they got a good spot to watch that very tour we're looking at now going past. Which leads me to a lot of questions, and here to help me answer them is Robert Sutton-Maddox from our news desk. To what do you attribute this ongoing fascination with the British royal family? Why the appeal?
Well, I think just look at that ceremony. It was so different from what we saw in 2011. It was fun. It was relaxed. It was almost like it had a festival feeling to it. And I think for this time around, the fascination is, almost more than we saw in 2011. Not only because it's we have an American bride. The Americans have a player in the game now. We see it from the coverage we're getting from the US, and also around the world. Everybody feels a little bit British when they see the royal family. They seem to connect with people, and especially when we talk about this wedding here today, it's been unorthodox. It's not traditional. It brings back sort of memories of Princess Diana's funeral, how we had Hollywood royalty together with British royalty. You know, we've had Mal Clooney, George Clooney, Elton John. This is really a coming together of two worlds, a celebrity world and also a royal world.
Absolutely, and it's been sort of scenes that are just made for television. Stunning scenes. Looks like the weather's been kind to them as well. So people with nothing better to do will have at least enjoyed the show, even if they don't support the institution. And on that issue of support, I'm just wondering, Prince Harry, it would appear, is, we were saying earlier on, he's one of the most, if not the most, popular member of the royal family. Is that true?
Yes, so Ipsos Mori did a poll back in March and April, and they did different figures for the UK and around the world. So actually in the UK, Prince Harry came top. He was the most popular royal, but around the world, it was the Queen and Prince Harry who had joined. So you see they're both on top. And there's really a generational divide there. You see the Queen on her own at the top, but then you have the younger members of the family, Prince William, Duchess of Cambridge. It's really up there as high, and then the next generation up, Prince Charles and Duchess of Cornwall, a little bit lower. But Prince Harry has always seen himself as trying to carry on the memory, perhaps, of his mother, who had this real connection with the people. She was approachable. People felt, you know, it's often heard that people felt they were the most important people in the room whenever they were speaking to her, and he's really tried to take that natural connection to people on with him. And I think a lot of people also respect the fact that he's served in Afghanistan not once but twice. He's set up the Invictus Games in 2014. So they've seen him as a royal that's really been working, and it's something that makes him a perfect match for Meghan Markle, as she is one of the first royal brides really to have had a completely separate public persona. She's had a job. She's been working for years as an actress on a very successful TV show in Suits, and she's been an activist, a feminist activist for many years, and she's been bringing up movements which are very much in current affairs right now with Me Too and Time's Up.
Yeah, she seems to have a finger on the pulse, certainly when it comes to what people around the world are discussing. We're actually just receiving a word from her father now. He's been speaking to the TMZ entertainment network in the United States. He's quoted as saying, "My baby looks beautiful. She looks very happy. I wish I was there. I wish them all my love and happiness." This comes from Meghan Markle's father, Thomas, who sadly wasn't able to be there to walk her down the aisle. That was a duty which was handed so late in the day to Prince Charles that the order of service didn't even have that on it. It still said that Thomas Markle, her father, was going to walk her down the aisle. That was quite a drama in itself, wasn't it, Robert?
Yeah, I think over the last few days we've had that real sort of will he, won't he. You know, one day he's going to be here, the next day he's not going to be here. But at the end of the day, we had Prince Charles come in, and apparently he was very, very touched that actually Meghan Markle asked him to do the honours to take her down the aisle. And the difference between the two is she actually chose to do the first bit herself, which, you know, has symbolism as well. But it's an unorthodox move, but there is royal precedent for this. So first of all, the Queen's sister, Princess Margaret, by the very fact that the Queen was on the throne, it meant that her father had sadly died, so also the father of Princess Margaret. So she was walked down the aisle by Prince Philip, so the Queen's husband. And it also went back to Queen Victoria, who herself, obviously her father had died, so she was walked down by her favourite uncle, who was the last Duke of Sussex. So there's a nice little connection there between the two. And it happened again twice more with Queen Victoria, her two daughters. Queen Victoria did the honours to take her daughters down the aisle in 1866 and 1885. So there is some royal precedent there.
OK, so not entirely without precedent, but it was a fairly unprecedented drama in the build-up to the wedding, probably one that no bride would want to have to deal with in the build-up to her big day. And a reminder, perhaps, Ophelie, of just the extent to which, and a taster, if you like, for the Duchess of Sussex, as she now is, of the sort of media scrutiny. She's going to have to put up with that for the rest of her life, isn't she?
Well, I guess if you marry into the royal family, you know you will have to put up with it. But as you said, I mean, she had a job. She worked as an actress. So I think she is used to being under media scrutiny already. And so I'm not really a specialist of media relations, but the TMZ issue was criticised by the serious British press like The Guardian, The Independent, The Times as a case of meddling, but they praised Kensington Palace for putting I would say for their sang-froid and aplomb. So it seems that they are fairly level-headed as far as media scrutiny is concerned.
Let's go to someone who knows a thing or two about covering royal events. We can cross to the United Kingdom, to Gloucester, and speak to David Wynne-Morgan, who is a former royal correspondent for the Daily Express newspaper. Now, David, thank you so much for speaking to us here on France 24. According to my research, you covered the coronation. Now, that was rather a long time ago, back in 1953. Looking at today's events and casting your memory and casting your mind back to the coronation, I mean, two very different sorts of event, weren't they?
Yes, they were. But I think the royal family has always been very good at adapting and modernising and changing, and it's one of the reasons why I think it has survived so well. I mean, apart from the coronation, Princess Margaret, who had wanted to marry Peter Townsend, who was a divorcee, and it was made quite clear that she couldn't do it. Even the government made it clear that she couldn't continue to be a royal princess and be married to Peter Townsend. She would just be Mrs. Peter Townsend. And she then made that statement where she said, mindful of the teachings of the Christian Church and her duty to the Commonwealth, she was giving it up. And now, 60 or more years later, we have someone of mixed race, American divorcee coming into the royal family, and I think personally, they were clearly, we could see, very much in love in today's ceremony, which I thought was beautiful, and I think she will strengthen the royal family. And over the past few days, quite a lot of Republicans, and there are some in the UK, have been on the airwaves and saying they wouldn't be watching and they were not taking any interest, it wasn't part of their life. Yet today we saw the vast majority of the British people celebrating this extraordinarily happy occasion. It was much more relaxed, it's been different, but I think it's a sign of just how well the royal family does adapt.
Yeah, we've just been hearing some figures about the sort of level of popularity that the royal family enjoys. According to some estimates, around 70% of the British public supports the monarchy. Do you think an event like today is going to boost that level of popularity even further, David?
I think it may. I think the important thing is that it maintains it. I mean, people always try and suggest that the royal family is getting less popular, that the Republican thing is moving, that we're out of time. But time and time again, it is just shown not to be true. I suspect it won't go up much above 70%, but I think 70%, is a very high figure for the support of the royal family in today's climate and the times we live in.
And you've been covering royal affairs for a very long time indeed, and you've seen and you've even advised members of the royal family during some very dark chapters in their modern history. They've made an incredible comeback from those dark days of, say, the mid to late 1990s, when really every royal marriage seemed to be falling apart at the seams. How do you think they've done that? How do you think they've bounced back from those low lows to what appears to be quite a high today?
Well, I think undoubtedly the greatest strength has been the Queen herself. I mean, she has been, her service to this country, she's the longest reigning monarch, and I think she's been totally steadfast and totally consistent. But I do think that the young royals, I think William and Prince Harry have also contributed. And I think Prince Harry in particular, he was a wild young man. I think the army was the making of him. I think he did the 2 tours in Afghanistan, and I think he's come back a different human being. He's grown up, he's matured, and I think both he and Prince William are going to be key to the continuing survival of the royal family, which I believe will go on for a very long time indeed.
And in terms of a future role for Prince Harry and his wife, we understand they're not taking a honeymoon immediately. They've got a royal engagement next week as a couple. It sounds like they're getting off to a pretty busy start. What sort of role do you see him usefully applying himself to in his new capacity of Duke of Sussex?
Well, I think he will play a very important part. I mean, the poll, came out very recently indeed, showed him to be second only to the Queen in popularity. I think he and Prince William actually get on extremely well and are very supportive of each other. I think he is going to be very devoted to the promotion of the Commonwealth, and I think he is going to do his royal duties both effectively and incredibly conscientiously. And I do think his wife is going to be of considerable help to him. I think she cares passionately. She looks radiant. She has a smile that captures the heart of most people. And I think he's going to be playing a very major role. I think he and Prince William will work very well indeed together.
Absolutely. It's been quite an emotional service, that was, I must say, and beautiful scenes on our television. Thank you so much for speaking to us. David Wynne-Morgan, former royal correspondent for the Daily Express newspaper in the United Kingdom. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. Standing by for us outside Kensington Palace, which was, of course, the home of the late Diana, Princess of Wales, is France 24's Bénédicte Paviot. Bénédicte, you're not in Windsor, where that open carriage parade is underway, but is there a sort of sense of involvement there at Kensington Palace, even though they're about 30 kilometres away from the main events themselves?
Yes, of course, people have naturally converged here in the park towards Kensington Palace, the home of Prince Harry and now of Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. And we know they're going to have a delayed honeymoon, which apparently is one of the modern things to do. So, what's the bet that maybe as soon as tomorrow or the day after they will be back here? Because we know that midweek, in fact, they're going to have their first royal engagement as a couple together, and I believe that is a reception that's going to be held for Prince Charles. We know also that they will play a big role in the Commonwealth, and interesting that in her 5-metre veil, apparently Meghan insisted on having all of the flowers of the Commonwealth represented in that veil, and I think it's that kind of symbolism and strong message that she and he will be giving. Because we know that the future king, Prince Charles, wants very much to streamline the royal family. So the Fab Four are and will be Kate and William. William, of course, Prince William, who will one day become king. And also Harry and Meghan will play an important role. We know, of course, the Queen is 92, in good health, as far as we know, and that her husband, Prince Philip, is 96, had a very serious operation, a hip operation, which he's recovering from. This is his first public appearance, and he was trying to get better for today, and he's done that. But we know also that the Queen is now delegating her trips abroad. And really, let me mention that word, Brexit. In these terms of Brexit and these times of Brexit, it is very important. And the Foreign Office decides and helps decide really very much where the royals, I will use the word deployed, throughout the world. So we will see Harry and Meghan, because of course they don't yet have children, as opposed to Prince William and Catherine, who have 3 little ones, George, Charlotte and now Louis, who is only weeks old. So they are freer to travel, and they will be going out and really carrying the brand of UK PLC across the world, in the hope that helping those ties throughout the Commonwealth and elsewhere, that this will help to promote, strengthen relationships, develop others, that will in terms also and in time benefit the United Kingdom, bring inward investment, stronger relationships. So who's to know, but after the raucous party we expect for 200 people this evening. That one will be hosted and given by Prince Charles, and we think that Elton John will be singing there. It will be interesting to see when the newlyweds, who are now hitched, come back here to their home, Kensington Palace.
OK, thank you very much indeed for that update. Bénédicte Paviot there at Kensington Palace in the heart of London, and that is the scene 30 kilometres away in Windsor, where that procession, that open carriage tour, seems to be drawing to a close. It's nearly lunchtime, and the bride and groom will be hosted by the Queen for a lunch together with the 600 invitees there at that wedding service in St George's Chapel. To talk us through what's happening next is Robert Sutton-Maddox from our news desk. What do we know about how things are going to pan out this afternoon?
So we've just arrived here at the upper ward of Windsor Castle, and they'll go into a reception for the 600 guests that we saw in the chapel. They'll be having their wedding cake there, which in itself, even the cake itself, was a non-traditional choice. So that was elderflower and lemon. Usually we'd go for something, a fruit cake. In fact, Queen Victoria's wedding, the fruitcake back in 1840, there was still a slice of it left in 2016 because Christie's auctioned one off. And
it keeps quite well, doesn't it, fruit?
It does keep very well, although I probably wouldn't suggest trying that one. And then later, as Benedict said, that there will be an ultra sort of exclusive reception just for the very closest friends at Frogmore House, which is a 17th century house built in Windsor Great Park. And we'll really see a new role for the now Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Their other titles are now the Earl and Countess of Dumbarton and Baron and Baroness Kilkeel, which is in Northern Ireland in County Down.
And they'll use that one of those titles, the Earl one.
So if they're travelling to Scotland, for example, they'll use the title Earl and Countess of Dumbarton. And then they'll be moving to Kensington Palace, but not the main palace, a little cottage at the back called Nottingham Cottage, and that will be their new home. And as they say, they have a week of engagements coming up next week, but then after that they will be going on honeymoon. It's apparently to be in Namibia, and Africa is something that's very close to both of their hearts, especially to Prince Harry, and considering it's so close to Botswana, which is apparently where they spent a week very early on in their relationship, it wouldn't be too much of a surprise if they decided to quickly cross the border there. In fact, one of the diamonds in the ring is from Botswana. And really, this brings us to sort of the popularity of the royal family themselves around the world. I think this has been a great day for their popularity. It really shows a new side, maybe bringing in a side of the population that weren't so involved with the royal family. And we look here at some of the statistics. So Ipsos Mori, in fact, did 28 countries. We've picked a few here. So we see there's a lot of popularity in old Commonwealth countries, but also in rather surprise entrants like Romania is incredibly popular. This might have something to do with Prince Charles, who first went there back in 1998, and it's for him. He said he fell in love with the place, and he goes back there often. He has a little guest house if you ever want to stay in a little village called Viscary. So that probably has a lot to do with him. And then United States is something we're not surprised to see right up there on the top. Further down, we see France. It still has a net popularity. I think there's a bit of a love-hate relationship with the royal family in France. Obviously, going back in history, they decided to take the move to get rid of theirs in sometimes quite a bloody manner. If we talk about Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, but also there's a fascination of something that doesn't exist anymore. And then right down the bottom we have Spain and Argentina. Spain, the popularity might be linked to their royal family, which is going through a current bit of a crisis in Spain, where they're experiencing a lot of unpopularity over the role of the king, and also the potential corruption issues at the top of the political system. And then in Argentina, Britain and Argentina historically have had a fairly bad relationship if we go back to 1981 and the Falklands War, so that might explain that there.
Absolutely, yeah, and the Spanish royal family have definitely been through some tough times of late, with one of their own having to testify in court, and of course the change of guard at the very top, with the king effectively resigning and handing the mantle over to his eldest son. Just turning back to you, Professor, I mean, just listening to what Rob was saying and what Benedict was saying before that about how the royal family is watched all around the world and that they're part of the sort of the brand Britain. How powerful and how valuable do you think that brand is?
Well, it's quite powerful if you consider tourism figures. It's been said that the royal family brings hundreds of millions of pounds to the treasury every year because tourists are attracted to it. But the brand itself is also important in terms of diplomacy, especially in the Brexit era. Shortly after the Brexit referendum, if I remember well, Kate and William were dispatched to Europe on a diplomatic tour in order to ease the mounting tensions between Britain and continental Europe. So yes, I think the brand still holds a special place.
And do you think other countries look at that brand with a degree of envy?
I'm really not sure, not being a specialist of royal families around the world. But I would say that if you just look at the figures, well, it's fair to say that they are quite popular, yes.
OK. Well, let's take a closer look now, because, of course, Meghan Markle, as she was, now the Duchess of Sussex, has got a pretty steep learning curve ahead of her. British royal protocol is notoriously rigid, and facing the prospect of the glare of the media for the rest of her life, it's probably all rather daunting. Let's take a closer look.
How to properly drink tea. Meghan Markle may be marrying Prince Harry at Windsor Castle, but it was here at this California tea house that she learned this key lesson in royal etiquette.
Ladies normally tend to leave the finger out, or as they say, the pinky out, slightly crooked. However, it's not. I don't think it's a good look for a man to do. I think men seem to hang on to it much more like this.
The Royal Protocol Rulebook doesn't end there. It also outlines how to walk, how to sit down at a table, and how to hold a knife and fork. But how to curtsy may be one of the most important. Grant Harold is a former royal butler to the Prince of Wales and Duchess of Cornwall. He demonstrates a perfect curtsy.
Perfect, and the curtsy, which is the right foot behind the left, toes touch the floor, down a little bit. That was quite good. A bit ballerina, so it's kind of keeping the legs almost kind of together. So yes, and then down. Perfect. Beautifully done. And hands in, because some people kind of put the hands in, and we're not penguins. Okay. So beautifully done.
Harold has an intimate knowledge of the royal etiquette that dates back centuries.
Etiquette and protocol is really important to the royal family. It's been important to royals for centuries. Louis XIV was the first royal that wanted this rule book, these rules as to how to behave in his palace and in his presence. And since then, royals have embraced this.
Meghan Markle has had to work to perfect her curtsy. She was taken to task in the British media around Christmas for supposedly failing her first curtsy to the Queen.
OK, so she's got a steep learning curve by the looks of things, the newly titled Duchess of Sussex there, leaving Hollywood royalty and joining the ranks of British royalty, as she has done today. That's the scene at Windsor Castle, where the wedding lunch is due to get underway very shortly. That's being hosted by the Queen. Some light relief for the royal couple after what's presumably been a pretty stressful day for them, a big day for them, a happy day for them, but clearly lots of organisation, a couple of last-minute dramas, as indeed is the case for most couples getting married. How do you think, Professor, that the newly titled Duchess of Sussex is going to adapt to royal life? Because as we just saw in that report, it's pretty rigid and there's a lot of rules that need to be respected.
Well, yes, she will have to adapt to protocol. Whether she will accept it, only history can tell.
She's not supposed to speak out, is she? So
she's not supposed to speak out. No members of the royal family are allowed to have a public political opinion.
Do you think that's going to be difficult for her? Because she's got a lot of causes that she's been vocal about up until this point, and presumably
yes, and
she'll be less vocal.
So she had all her social media accounts taken offline, and she voiced her rejection of Brexit on her Instagram account. So that was, you know, scrapped away. So yeah, she is definitely political, but as the newest member of the royal family, she will use, I think, her charity work to channel her political side. I think it will be more appropriate as far as protocol is concerned. But yes, the royal family, they are constitutionally forbidden to have a political opinion, at least officially, publicly. They are supposed to be above party politics. If they weren't, it would be a case of tyranny. And they don't have the right to vote. They're not allowed to vote in a general election.
Goodness, so she's sort of given up her democratic right in one respect to become...
Yes, because they are supposed to be symbols above all else.
Okay, so she'll have to bite her tongue on presumably a number of issues that are close to her heart and that she's been vocal about until now, but can no longer be vocal. And just looking at the ceremony, I'm assuming you were watching the ceremony as well, Robert. I mean, do you get the impression that this was a ceremony that had her stamp on it in terms of how it was put together and the sort of content that was in the wedding ceremony itself?
Well, I think everybody speaks about, you know, I've heard a lot today about Prince Harry having his stamp on there, but for me, what I really saw was Meghan Markle's stamp on the ceremony. Yeah. It was a perfect mix of continuity, which is what we expect to see, and also, you know, it had a real modern flavour, and it was a fun ceremony. I think you just looked at the people in the audience; people were enjoying themselves, and you really saw the contrast between 2011, when it was very conservative, quite rigid. Protocol was perfection, but you didn't get that same sense of fun, and I think that's something that Meghan Markle has really brought to the ceremony, also to the royal family. We saw some elements which were, you know, new. I think that St George's Chapel, it was a complete you know, relaunch of what the chapel had ever seen, having Bishop Michael Curry there. It was a real uplifting, invigorating sermon.
It's a much more intimate sort of environment, isn't it? The St Paul's Cathedral, more intimidating, daunting.
It was an intimate, you know, it was always meant to be a family occasion, and you really felt that, but yet people were invited in, and people, especially in the outside, people felt they were also part of that family feeling as well.
Let's go back to Windsor and speak to our correspondent who's following the royal wedding for us. Mark Owen is there in Windsor. Mark, it appears the parade is sort of coming to an end, and it looks like the party is about to sort of get started, at least the first of two. Is that the case?
Indeed, that party is getting started. Just a word about the parade, which was, I'm sure you saw the images, but listening to the sound as they were going round and they swept past quite near where we are, there was a real rumble of people appreciating the couple for who they are and really getting behind them and getting involved and making it really as much the event it is as anything else that happened within the chapel or within the family or whatever else. The people here have really contributed so much to making this a great day, and the sun came out, you know, which obviously sort of put the lie to the myth that it always rains in the UK, and created a situation which has given us a fantastic day here in Windsor, and I think a great advertisement for what the royal family can become. The inclusion of someone like Meghan Markle is remarkable on so many levels. It would have been unthinkable many decades ago, and it's just given the royal family a different level, and maybe she can take them to yet another level again.
Yeah, and it's not just Brits, is it, that are watching the proceedings there in Windsor. We're seeing American flags, because, of course, this is an American bride, now a British royal. And I was just talking here in the studio a moment ago about this British brand and how the royal family contributes to it. I mean, do you think that's something that's looked at with envy by other countries, Mark?
In my opinion, yes. I think there are those who would like to see the United Kingdom become a republic. There are those who think that it is unthinkable to get rid of the royal family. And the fact that the royal family does so much, is so present, certainly has changed, notably since the death of Princess Diana, into a more outreaching institution rather than a somewhat remote institution as it had become, I think. There's been a whole different interpretation of who they are, and I think the popularity, in particular, of Prince Harry, who the poll has shown is the most popular royal right now. I think his popularity is really something that is going to grow and grow. I think people watched him grow up. He went through the tragedy of losing his mother at the age of 12 and had to follow her coffin during that funeral procession, which he says has told people that it's something that really lives with him and marked him very, very badly. And you can imagine, 12 years old, going through that, it must have been appallingly difficult for him. He grew up, there were growing pains, there were things that went wrong, there were things that were embarrassing, all covered, of course, by the tabloid press. And now he's going into a young man who has a thought for people, he has a thought for causes. He's working with his new wife on various charity projects, including HIV/AIDS. Again, a project that was really close to Princess Diana's heart as well. So, in many ways, her influence lives. His popularity, I think, can only grow, and the profile of Meghan Markle can only go up and up. I think this is someone who is canny enough to understand the limitations of being in the royal family, but also understands the advantages and the privileges that can give.
Yeah, and we heard an address, one of the readings was given by the late Princess of Wales' sister, Lady Jane Fellows, and it was poignant, wasn't it? The Spencer family, and notably, as you said, the spirit of Diana was very much there, and she seems to have passed that mantle on to her two sons, certainly in terms of the sorts of causes that they have supported up until this point and the sort of role they might carve out for themselves later on down the line. Mark?
Oh, completely. I don't know whether you're old enough to remember, Tom, but certainly I can remember the images, the news images of Diana and Charles coming back from some visit, and she arrives, and the first thing she does, she sort of throws her arms open, and the two sons run straight to her, and it's something that I think British people had never seen before, that kind of outward expression of love from the royal family to their own children, which to you and I would be normal, to normal people would be completely the usual thing to do, but it was very different, that kind of expression. And I think what the boys have grown up with, William and Harry, is that feeling, as you say, of taking that on. And obviously the family changed in some ways clearly after the death of Diana, and sort of tried to sort of look at how they related to the outside world, to the people that they represent, and the people who they, in inverted commas, rule. And this has left its legacy with these two boys who, as you say, have taken on the mantle of their late mother and begun to do things in a way that I think appeals to so many people across the UK and has created a whole different profile for the royal family. It's a remarkable change of events, a remarkable turnabout. And Harry, with his great popularity, maybe sort of embodies that most, I think.
Okay, well, thank you for that update, Mark. And indeed, I am old enough to remember those scenes you were describing. Doesn't feel like all that long ago, in fact.
You don't look it. You don't look it, Tom.
You're a kind man. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm quite a bit older than the groom of the day. Just turning back to our professor here in the studio, Ophélie Siméon. We were just hearing there from Mark this idea that the royal family has become much more in touch with the people. They're much more in tune with the modern day than they used to be, and perhaps that is indeed partly thanks to the late Princess of Wales. But haven't they got to be careful to maintain at least some air of mystique and air of mystery around them? Otherwise, they'll just become a little bit ordinary, won't they?
Yes, I think they have to tread quite carefully in terms of preserving their popularity, because popularity is a very fickle thing. It comes and goes. So yes, there is definitely an air of mystique, as you said, an air of mystery, an air of grandeur that they have to maintain. But at the same time, and this really comes from the British people itself, the people with the capital P, they want them to be more human. They want them to be more normal, especially in this age of social media. And one of the reasons why the royal family was so unpopular after Princess Diana's death was the fact that they kept a very private and very cold front, whereas the British people wanted them to mourn publicly. So there was really a discrepancy between what the British public wanted from their royal family and
what they were getting,
what the protocol was like, and to be honest, from what I read from the press that is not really a fan of the monarchy, that is to say the Guardian, the Observer, the Independent, even they are actually in favour of this renewed brand of royals. They are quite happy with the Fab Four, that is to say William, Kate, Harry and Meghan. They are welcoming this as a royal family that is more in touch with the people, that is less prone to gaffes. That was the case with Prince Philip and with Prince Charles. So yes, even they're not really big fans of the monarchy, but they think that the younger generation gives a better image.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see. The United Kingdom, not always united. There are fractures in the country. There are dark clouds and uncertainties hanging over the country at this moment, more perhaps than at other times in recent memory. But we'll have to see how they do. We'll have to see how these two dukes and two duchesses get on with picking up that mantle and bringing the royal family forward into the next decades. Just a reminder, if you're tuning in, we've been looking at the royal wedding there in Windsor, the wedding between the newly titled Duke and Duchess of Sussex, who got married at Windsor Castle in the St George's Chapel. A moving service filled with emotion and filled with firsts, lots of unprecedented choices in the order of service, but altogether everything seems to have gone to plan, bang on time, and we've been analysing the effects of all of this on the royal family's popularity, already popular. Will this make them more popular in the months and years ahead? We'll have to see. But I'd like to thank our guests here in the studio, Professor Ophélie Siméon from La Sorbonne Nouvelle, I should say. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Robert Sutton-Maddox from our news desk, thank you very much indeed to you. Thanks to our teams in the field at Kensington Palace and at Windsor Castle, Benedict Pavio and Mark Owen. Thanks to both of you. That's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again soon here on France 24.